Before the Spanish arrived and named it, before the word adobo ever touched Philippine soil, Filipino ancestors had already mastered the art of keeping meat alive without refrigeration. They did it with vinegar, salt, and thyme, and what they created was not just food. It was chemistry. It was strategy. It was survival encoded into flavor. The dish you think you know is older, deeper, and far more radical than anyone has told you. Long before 1565, when Miguel López de Legazpi's fleet anchored off Cebu and Spanish boots first pressed into Philippine sand, the islands already had a sophisticated culinary tradition of preserving meat in acidic mediums. Indigenous Filipinos used tuba, fermented coconut vinegar, and sukong payambon, a vinegar brewed from nipa palm, to cure protein against the brutal tropical heat. This technique was not learned from colonizers. It was inherited from centuries of Austronesian seafaring culture, carried across ocean migration routes from Taiwan through the Philippine archipelago as far back as 2000 BCE. When the Spanish encountered this cooking method, they recognized the result: it resembled their own adubar, a Iberian marinating tradition. So they named it. But naming something you did not invent is not discovery. It is erasure dressed as documentation. The pre-colonial version had no garlic. Garlic arrived with the Chinese traders through the Manila galleon routes. It had no bay leaves, those came from Mediterranean influence. What it had was vinegar, salt, and the precise knowledge of how acid defeats bacterial growth. The Spanish name stuck. The Filipino origin was buried beneath it. For 300 years of colonial rule, the narrative of adobo was slowly rewritten, positioned as a dish that emerged from Spanish influence rather than one that predated it. It took post-colonial food historians, molecular archaeologists, and a new generation of Filipino chefs to begin excavating the truth. What they found was a dish that belonged entirely to the archipelago, born from necessity, refined by generations, and powerful enough to survive both tropical heat and 3 centuries of colonial amnesia. Adobo does not have one recipe. It has over 100, and every region of the Philippine archipelago treats it as a living document, something to be rewritten in the dialect of local ingredients and inherited instinct. In Cavite, adobo is cooked without soy sauce entirely, relying solely on vinegar and salt in a style called adobong puti, white adobo, that is closest to the pre-colonial original. The result is stark, sharp, and almost aggressively acidic, a flavor profile that demands rice and commands respect. Travel north to Ilocos and adobo absorbs the region's love of fermented ingredients. Here it is sometimes finished with bagoong, fermented fish paste, adding a layer of umami so deep it registers almost as a separate dish. In Bicol, where the land grows some of the Philippines' most potent chile, adobo is folded into gata, fresh coconut milk, and spiked with siling labuyo, creating a version that is simultaneously rich and incendiary. The Ilocano version uses more vinegar and less liquid overall, producing a drier, more concentrated result designed for the region's cooler highland climate. Batangas produces an adobo finished with achuit annatto seeds that stains the sauce a deep burnt orange and adds a subtle earthiness. In Mindanao, Muslim Filipino communities adapt the dish without pork, using chicken or beef and sometimes incorporating local spices that reflect centuries of Arab and Malay trade influence. Each regional variation is not a deviation from the original. Each one is the original, shaped by geography, climate, available ingredients, and the specific memory of the community that carries it. The science inside adobo is not accidental. Every ingredient performs a precise biological function, and together they create one of the most effective natural preservation systems ever developed outside a laboratory. Vinegar, whether cane, coconut, or palm, is the anchor. Its acetic acid drops the pH of the cooking environment to between 3.0 and 4.5, a range in which most pathogenic bacteria including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria cannot survive. This is not folklore. This is microbiology. Salt works alongside the acid as a secondary preservative, drawing moisture out of the meat through osmosis and creating a hostile environment for microbial growth. The combination of acid and salt is called a hurdle system in food science, multiple preservation barriers working simultaneously so that no single bacteria can adapt and survive. But the science does not stop at preservation. The cooking process itself triggers a cascade of chemical reactions that build adobo's signature depth of flavor. When the meat first hits the hot oil after braising, the Maillard reaction ignites a non-enzymatic browning process between amino acids and reducing sugars that produces hundreds of distinct flavor compounds simultaneously. This is the same reaction that browns bread crust and sears steak, and in adobo it creates a lacquered, caramelized exterior that seals in the braising liquid's complexity. The fat rendered from the meat during the long braise acts as a flavor solvent, carrying fat-soluble compounds from the garlic, bay leaf, and peppercorns deeper into the protein fibers than water alone could achieve. The result is a dish where every layer of flavor has a molecular explanation, and every technique choice made by Filipino ancestors thousands of years ago turns out to be scientifically optimal. Today, Filipino adobo sits at the center of one of the most significant culinary conversations happening in global food culture, the question of what authenticity means when a dish belongs to a diaspora scattered across every continent. In New York, Manila-born chef Carlo Lamagna serves adobo as a fine dining composition, the braising liquid reduced to a glossy lacquer, the chicken arranged with architectural precision, the vinegar tang balanced against a coconut cream foam that would have been unthinkable in a Pampanga kitchen 50 years ago. In London, Filipino pop-up kitchens serve adobo in brioche buns to lunch crowds who have never been to Manila but return every week. In Los Angeles, second-generation Filipino Americans are documenting their grandmother's adobo recipes on YouTube before those women are gone. An act of cultural preservation as urgent as anything happening in an academic archive. The tension between tradition and reinvention is real, and it is generational. Older Filipino cooks often view fusion adobo with suspicion, a commodification of something sacred. Younger chefs argue that adobo has always evolved, that every regional variation was once an innovation, and that the dish's survival depends on its ability to absorb new influences without losing its core identity. Both arguments are correct. And that tension, between the weight of history and the pull of the present, is exactly what makes adobo the most important dish in the Filipino culinary canon. Subscribe to the Culinary Archives. This is not a food channel. This is a recovery mission, and adobo is only the beginning.